I never thought a summer on my uncle's farm would change my life forever. I went there just to escape the noise of the city, the endless work, the failed relationships, the loneliness I could never quite name. I wanted peace, simplicity, but what I found was something far more complicated. His name was Luke, the head ranch hand, the kind of man you notice the second he walks into a room. Sunburned skin, strong jaw, arms that looked like they'd been carved by work itself. He was quiet, disciplined, the type that didn't say much. But when he did, you listened. At first we barely spoke. I was the city boy who didn't belong. He was the man who'd seen too much to waste words. But the way he looked at me, the brief glances, the silent tension in the air when our hands brushed, told another story. Out there, surrounded by nothing but fields and sky, I learned that sometimes love doesn't shout. It waits. It hides behind small gestures, rough hands, and the quiet understanding that some feelings can change everything. What happened that summer still haunts me. Because in the middle of that heat, under that wide southern sky, I realized something I never expected. Sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't falling for someone you shouldn't. It's realizing you can't stop. Stay until the end. You'll understand why that night on the farm changed both of us forever. When I arrived at my uncle's farm, the air felt heavier than in the city, not because of pollution, but because of something different, something honest. The smell of earth, hay, and the slow rhythm of work that didn't stop when the sun went down. My uncle Robert was waiting for me by the barn, his wide hat shading half his face. "You'll be staying in the south cabin," he said, "and Luke will show you around. Try not to slow him down. He doesn't like that." I didn't know who Luke was yet, but the tone in my uncle's voice made me think he wasn't the kind of man you joked around with. When I dropped my bag in the cabin, the door creaked, and I heard heavy footsteps outside. I turned, and there he was. Luke. He was taller than I expected, maybe 6'2", with shoulders broad enough to block the light from the doorway. His shirt was half open, sticking slightly to his chest from sweat, revealing the kind of body that wasn't made in a gym. It was built by labor, by life. His skin was sun-browned, his eyes a deep hazel that looked both warm and distant at the same time. And when he finally spoke, his voice came low and calm, like gravel. "You must be Ethan," he said. I nodded, suddenly aware of how small I felt. "Yeah, that's me. My uncle said you'd show you around," he interrupted. "Grab your boots. You'll need them." We walked through the property, and he explained everything. Where the horses were kept, the feed schedule, the irrigation lines. I tried to listen, but I couldn't stop glancing at him. There was something hypnotic about the way he moved, precise, effortless, like he belonged to the land itself. At one point, we stopped near the pasture. A mare was giving Luke trouble, pulling against the rope, kicking up dust. I flinched, but Luke didn't. He just stepped closer, whispered something I couldn't hear, and the animal stilled, as if she understood him. I smiled. "That's impressive." He turned to me, expression unreadable. "You just have to know how to talk to them." "I guess I'm more used to people," I said. "And they don't listen that easily." That made him pause. For a second, a small smile touched his lips, the kind that fades almost as soon as it appears. "People are harder to read," he said. "They lie. Animals don't." Something in the way he said it made my chest tighten. I wanted to ask what he meant, but he'd already turned away. That evening the air was cooler. I stood by the cabin window watching him work as the sun went down, the golden light catching the sweat on his skin. He lifted hay bales like they weighed nothing, the muscles in his back flexing under his shirt. I should have looked away. I didn't. Later at dinner, my uncle was talking about crop yields, but my mind was elsewhere. Luke sat across from me, quiet, cutting his steak with slow precision. Once our eyes met, he didn't smile. He didn't look away either. There was something charged in that silence, something that made it hard to breathe. Afterward, I stepped outside. The sky stretched wide above me, stars so bright they almost looked close enough to touch. I heard footsteps behind me and turned. It was him. "You're not used to quiet, are you?" he asked. I shrugged. "Not like this. In the city there's always noise." Sirens, traffic, people here. It's like time stops. He leaned against the railing beside me. That's why I stay, he said. Out here, nobody pretends. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The night was filled only with the sound of crickets and the faint hum of the wind. Then he said quietly, "You shouldn't stay out here alone after dark. Coyotes wander close sometimes. Are they dangerous?" I asked. "Only if they're hungry," he replied, his eyes meeting mine in a way that made my pulse race. Something unspoken passed between us. It wasn't just the tension of strangers. It was the recognition of two people trying not to feel something they already did. He pushed away from the railing. "You should get some sleep. Tomorrow starts early." He walked off, boots crunching on the gravel, and I stood there staring after him, my heart still beating too fast. I didn't understand why his words, simple, ordinary, carried so much weight. That night I lay in bed, staring at the wooden ceiling, the sound of the wind brushing through the fields outside. I told myself it was just admiration, that I was just drawn to his strength, his silence, his certainty. But when I closed my eyes, I saw the way he looked at me, and for the first time I realized the truth was far more dangerous than that, because out here, in a place where no one was watching, I was starting to feel something I couldn't hide, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. The next morning, the sun came up slow and pale through the fog that had settled over the valley. The air smelled like rain, heavy and electric, as if something was waiting to break. Luke was already outside when I stepped from the cabin, sleeves rolled up, fixing a broken fence. He barely looked at me when I approached. "You're up late," he said. "It's 6:30, I replied, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "Out here, that's half the day gone." He gave me a faint grin, the kind that wasn't quite teasing but wasn't cold either. I tried to help with the fence, but after a few failed attempts at hammering the nails straight, he stopped me. "You're gonna hurt yourself," he said, reaching over to take the hammer from my hand. His fingers brushed mine for half a second, just a touch, but it sent a quiet shock through me that stayed long after he turned away. He showed me how to hold the post steady, his body close behind mine, his arm brushing my shoulder as he worked. I could feel the warmth radiating off his skin, even through the cool morning air. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "Like this," he said, voice low, almost a whisper. I nodded, afraid to move, afraid of what might happen if I did. By noon, the sky had turned dark. Storm clouds rolled over the hills like slow-moving beasts. My uncle told us to bring the horses into the stable before the rain started. Luke worked fast, his shirt soaked through, his hair plastered against his forehead. I tried to help, but one of the younger horses panicked and nearly broke free. Luke was there before I could blink, one hand gripping the rope, the other steadying me by the waist. "Careful," he said sharply, his breath close against my ear. "You can't show fear." "They feel it," I nodded, not sure if the tremor running through me was fear or something else entirely. Thunder cracked in the distance, and the rain came down hard. Within minutes we were both drenched. I could barely see, mud splattering across my boots as we led the last horse inside. When the stable door shut, the sudden quiet made everything louder. The pounding of the rain, our uneven breathing, and the fact that we were standing so close that his chest was almost against my back. "Guess we're stuck here until it passes," Luke said, wiping water from his face. I turned to face him, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. The light from the open window hit him just right, highlighting the curve of his jaw, the scar near his eyebrow, the faint drops of rain trailing down his neck. "You ever seen rain like this?" I asked, just to break the silence. He shrugged. "Out here storms come fast. Leave just as quick," I smiled faintly. "That sounds like something you'd say about people." He looked at me then, really looked. "Sometimes it's true," he said. "Some people walk in, stir everything up, and before you know it, they're gone." I didn't know what made me say it, but the words slipped out before I could stop them. "Maybe some of them don't want to leave." The air between us thickened. His gaze didn't move from mine. Outside, lightning flashed, lighting up the stable for a split second, and in that light he looked different, softer, vulnerable. He took a small step closer. I could feel the tension humming through him like a storm waiting to break. "Ethan," he started, then stopped. My name on his lips sent another wave through me. "What?" I whispered. He shook his head. "Nothing. You should dry off before you catch a cold." He turned away too fast, grabbing an old towel from the shelf and tossing it to me. I caught it, though my hands were shaking. We stayed there for another hour, listening to the rain crash against the roof. I sat on a bale of hay, watching him pace back and forth, his eyes unfocused like he was fighting a war I couldn't see. I wanted to ask what he was thinking, but I didn't dare. When the storm finally began to fade, he stopped pacing and leaned against the wall, staring out at the fading light. "You should go back," he said quietly. "Your uncle will wonder. You're not coming. I've got work to finish here." I stood hesitating. Part of me wanted to stay, to say something, anything that would make him turn around. But I didn't. I just nodded and left, the sound of the rain still echoing in my ears. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the way he'd looked at me, torn, conflicted, as if something in him wanted to move closer but couldn't. Then, near midnight, there was a knock on my cabin door. 3 short raps. My heart jumped. When I opened it, Luke stood there, rain still dripping from his hair, his shirt clinging to him. "You forgot this," he said, holding out the towel I'd used earlier. I took it slowly. "You came all the way here just to give me this." He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at me for a long, tense moment, the kind that makes time stop. Then finally he said in a voice that was barely above a whisper, "I don't know what this is, Ethan, but whatever it is, it's getting harder to ignore." Before I could respond, he turned and walked back into the darkness, and as the door shut, I realized the storm outside had ended, but the one inside me had only just begun. The next morning was strangely quiet. The air felt heavy again, as if the storm hadn't really left. It had only gone somewhere deeper. I avoided Luke at breakfast. My uncle was talking about a delivery. The radio was humming softly. But all I could think about was what Luke had said the night before. "It's getting harder to ignore." Those words had replayed in my head all night, and now every time I saw him, my chest tightened like a rope pulling at both ends. By mid-afternoon, my uncle sent us to the north field to check the fences. The sky was burning blue, and the smell of wet grass still lingered from the storm. Luke didn't say much. He just walked beside me, his hat low, his eyes scanning the land as if it could distract him from everything else. Finally, I broke the silence. "About last night?" He stiffened. "Forget it. I can't." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the exhaustion behind his calm expression. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "There are lines here. Lines I can't cross. Lines you already did," I answered. That made him pause. For a second, the wind was the only thing moving between us. Then he turned away. "You should go back to the cabin. I'll finish here." But I didn't move. "Luke," I said, stepping closer, "you keep pretending this is nothing, but it's not. You know it's not." He clenched his jaw, his hands tightening on the fence post. "You think this is easy for me? Then stop fighting it," I whispered. He turned sharply, eyes dark with something between anger and longing. "You don't know what you're asking for." Before I could reply, a shout echoed from across the field. One of the workers was waving frantically toward the barn. Smoke was rising behind him. Luke didn't hesitate. "Go!" he yelled. We ran, the ground slick under our boots. Flames licked the edge of the roof, smoke curling upward like a living thing. Horses screamed inside. Without a word, Luke grabbed a bucket and charged through the door. I followed. The heat was unbearable. I could barely see through the smoke. Luke moved fast, untying the animals, guiding them out. I tried to help, but a beam cracked and fell near me, throwing sparks across the floor. "Ethan!" Luke shouted, appearing through the smoke. He grabbed my arm and pulled me back. His grip was iron, his voice fierce. "You shouldn't be in here." "I'm not leaving you." For a second, our eyes met in the flickering firelight. Then he dragged me toward the exit, half pushing, half carrying me out, until we burst into the open air. We collapsed near the trough, both coughing, covered in soot. The barn behind us roared like a dying beast, but most of the horses were safe. My chest burned and my hands shook, but all I could see was him, Sweat and ash streaked across his skin, his breath coming fast. "You're insane," I managed between coughs. He looked at me, eyes blazing. "You followed me in there because I wasn't going to watch you die." Something snapped in that moment. The distance between us vanished. He reached out, cupping the back of my neck, his forehead almost touching mine. The smell of smoke mixed with rain and sweat, the world around us disappearing. "I told myself I wouldn't do this," he murmured, voice trembling. "But you make me forget everything that matters." And then he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was raw, desperate, the kind of kiss that breaks something open inside you. My hands found his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart under the soot-stained fabric. The world burned behind us, but I didn't care. For that moment, there was only him, the man who had built walls so high even he couldn't climb them, finally letting one fall. When he pulled away, he didn't speak. He just looked at me, his hand still against my jaw. His eyes were softer now, but full of fear. "This can't happen again," he said. I wanted to argue, to say that it already had, that there was no going back. But before I could, my uncle's truck came roaring across the field. Luke stood up, stepping back like he'd been caught doing something forbidden. "Go inside," he said under his breath. "Luke, please." His voice cracked just slightly. I turned away, walking toward the cabin, my whole body shaking. When I glanced back, he was still standing there, watching the flames die, his hands trembling. That night the farm was quiet again. Too quiet. My uncle said little, too busy counting the damage. But Luke didn't come by. Not once. I waited outside until the stars came out, hoping for the sound of his boots, the creak of the porch. Nothing. Just silence and the faint scent of smoke still hanging in the air. And in that silence, I realized that something had changed between us, something we couldn't undo. I lay awake until dawn. The image of him in the firelight burned into my mind. He'd saved me, kissed me, and then pushed me away, whatever line he thought he couldn't cross. He already had, and deep down I knew so had I. The fire changed everything, but not in the way I expected. In the days that followed, Luke barely looked at me. He kept himself buried in work, rebuilding the barn from dawn till sunset. If I walked by, he'd turn away, jaw tight, pretending not to notice. My uncle thanked him for saving the horses, for saving me. But Luke just nodded like none of it mattered. It did. Every night. I could still feel the weight of his hand on my neck, the heat of his lips. The way he'd said this can't happen again, as if he was trying to convince himself. Not me. By the fourth day, the silence between us was unbearable. I found him behind the barn, alone, repairing a broken stall door. His shirt was open halfway down, the muscles in his arms flexing as he worked, the sun turning his skin to bronze. My stomach twisted just watching him. "Luke," I said softly. He froze, hammer mid-air. Then, without turning, he muttered, "Shouldn't you be helping your uncle?" I took a slow step closer. He told me to check the fence. "But I needed to talk to you first." "There's nothing to talk about," he said, hitting the nail harder than necessary. "Yes, there is." My voice shook. "You kissed me." He finally turned. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes betrayed him, full of turmoil and guilt. "That was a mistake," he said. "Then why did it feel like the only real thing that's happened since I got here?" He dropped the hammer, the sound echoing between us. "You don't know what you're saying." I stepped closer, refusing to back down. "I know exactly what I'm saying. You can keep pretending this doesn't mean anything, but I see the way you look at me. The way you avoid me, the way you're fighting yourself every second." He stared at me for a long moment, then exhaled sharply. "You think this is simple? You think I can just be what you want me to be?" I didn't answer. He moved toward me, closing the distance in 2 strides. "You don't know what it's like out here," he said, his voice low, trembling. "These people, they talk, they watch. I've built a life here, a reputation. You think I can throw that away?" "Maybe it's not about them," I said quietly. "Maybe it's about what you're afraid of." His eyes flickered with something raw. "Anger, fear, maybe both. "I'm not afraid," he said. "Then prove it." Before I could take another breath, he grabbed my wrist. His hand was rough, calloused, trembling with something that wasn't quite anger anymore. "You don't know what you're asking," he said, his voice breaking. "If I let this happen," I interrupted, my heart pounding, "then you'd finally stop lying to yourself." For a second, he looked like he might pull me closer, but instead, he released my wrist and stepped back, turning away. "Ethan, stop." "No," I said firmly. "I won't." He turned then, slowly, and I saw tears building in his eyes. "You need to go," he whispered. "Before I do something I can't take back." But I didn't move. "I'm not leaving." He closed his eyes, shaking his head, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might break. Then in one motion, he reached for me again, his hands gripping my shoulders. His breath hitched, and for a moment I saw the war inside him, between what he wanted and what he thought he should be. "I told myself I'd never cross that line again," he said, voice low and trembling. "Not after last time. Last time." I asked, my voice barely audible. He hesitated. "There was someone. Years ago he left. And when he did, people found out. I almost lost everything. The farm, the work, the respect. I swore I'd never let anyone close enough again." The silence that followed was heavy, filled only by the sound of the wind through the open stall. I swallowed hard. "Maybe that's why you should let someone in. You've been surviving, not living." He looked at me, and for the first time I saw something change in him, a crack in the armor he'd built. He reached up slowly, brushing a piece of straw from my hair. His hand lingered against my temple. "You drive me crazy," he said, a faint smile breaking through. "Good," I whispered. "Then we're even." This time he didn't fight it. His hand slid down the side of my face, and then he kissed me again, slower, deeper, like he'd finally stopped running. The world outside the barn disappeared, replaced by the sound of his heartbeat, the warmth of his body against mine, the taste of smoke and rain, and something dangerously real. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine, breathing hard. "If anyone finds out..." "They won't," I said. "And even if they did, I wouldn't care." He closed his eyes, his hand still on the back of my neck. "You should," he murmured. I shook my head. "Not about this." He laughed softly, a broken sound that made my chest ache. "You're going to ruin me, Ethan." "Maybe you need to be ruined," I said gently. That made him open his eyes. He looked at me, really looked, and for a moment I thought he might agree. But then footsteps echoed outside the barn. Luke froze. He pushed me back gently, panic flashing across his face. "Go," he whispered. Before I could argue, the door swung open. My uncle stood there looking between us. His eyes narrowed slightly, then moved to the tools scattered on the ground. "Everything all right here?" he asked. Luke cleared his throat. "Yeah," he said quickly. "Just fixing the stall." My uncle nodded slowly. "Good. Dinner's in an hour." When he left, Luke turned to me, face pale. "You need to be careful," he said softly. "He's not stupid." I nodded, my heart still racing. As the sun began to set outside, Luke leaned against the doorframe, staring at the horizon. "Tomorrow," he said quietly. "We talk tomorrow. No more hiding." But deep down I knew whatever he was planning to say tomorrow could change everything, and I wasn't sure either of us would be ready for it. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Luke, the way he'd looked at me in that dim light, torn between fear and surrender. He'd said tomorrow, but something in his voice made me afraid that tomorrow might never come. When morning broke, the ranch was already alive with movement. Workers moved between barns, voices echoing across the open field. The air smelled like hay and diesel, and the sun was rising golden over the hills. But Luke was nowhere to be seen. I checked the stables first. Empty. His tools were gone. The truck that usually sat by the barn was missing too. My stomach twisted. By mid-morning I finally spotted him, down by the river alone, sitting on a rock with his hat beside him. I walked quietly, unsure if he wanted to see me. When he turned, his expression was unreadable. "You came," he said. "You told me to," I answered. He gave a faint, tired smile. "You're too good at following orders." I sat beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his arm brushing mine. The water shimmered with sunlight, peaceful and cruelly calm compared to the storm inside us. "Luke," I said carefully. "You said we'd talk." He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the river. "Yeah, I've been thinking about it all night. About you, about this." He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "Ethan, what we're doing, it's dangerous. Not because of me, but because of where we are. This town, these people. You think they'd understand?" I wanted to tell him I didn't care, that love was worth the risk. But I saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he carried from years of silence and self-denial. He wasn't just afraid of others, he was afraid of himself. "I'm not asking for forever," I said softly. "I'm just asking for now, for you to stop pretending you don't feel it." He turned to me then, and for the first time there was no wall between us. His eyes glistened in the morning light, full of things he'd never said aloud. "You make it sound so simple." "Maybe it is," I whispered. He laughed quietly. "It never is." We sat in silence. The breeze stirred the grass, and I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd reach for me again. But then a voice shouted from across the field. "My uncle's! Luke!" Luke flinched. My uncle approached fast, his face tight with suspicion. "I've been looking for you," he said sharply. "You were supposed to check the south fence 2 hours ago." "I was just taking a break," Luke said, standing. His tone was calm, controlled. My uncle's eyes moved between us, his jaw tightening. "A break, out here? With him?" My pulse spiked. Luke crossed his arms. "He's an adult, Tom. He can walk wherever he wants, but my uncle wasn't buying it." "You listen to me," he said, voice rising. "You're here because I trust you. Don't make me regret that. I haven't done anything wrong." My uncle stepped closer, his voice dropping into something colder. "Haven't you?" The silence that followed was suffocating. He looked at me, really looked, and I could tell he saw everything. The truth we'd been hiding, the secret written all over our faces. "Get back to the house," he snapped at me. "Uncle, now!" I turned, walking away, my chest burning. I didn't look back, but I could hear their voices behind me, harsh, low, breaking apart. When Luke returned to the cabin hours later, the sun was setting, and he looked like he'd been through a war. His knuckles were raw, his shirt half torn. "What happened?" I asked. He leaned against the door, silent for a moment. "He fired me," he said finally. "Told me to leave by tomorrow morning." The words hit me like a punch. "He can't." "He can," Luke interrupted. And he did. I felt the room tilt, like the floor had fallen out from under me. "Because of me," I said quietly. He shook his head. "No, because of me. Because I let myself care. Luke, don't—" He turned toward me, his voice cracking. "I knew what would happen, Ethan. I knew this place, these people. They'd never let me live in peace if they knew who I really am." I took a step closer. "Then don't give them that power. Stay. We'll figure it out." He laughed bitterly. "You think it's that easy? You don't know what it's like to spend your whole life hiding, and then—" He stopped, breathing hard. "Then you come along, and for the first time I feel alive, and it ruins everything." "Maybe it's not ruined," I said, desperate. "Maybe it's just starting." He looked at me like I was breaking his heart. "You deserve someone who isn't afraid." "Then stop being afraid," I said, my voice shaking. His eyes softened, and for a moment he almost smiled. "You always think you can fix things." "Not everything," I whispered. "Just you." He closed the distance between us, his hand trembling as he reached for my face. "You already did." Then he kissed me, slow, painful, full of everything we couldn't say. It was the kind of kiss that felt like goodbye. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against mine. "Tomorrow morning I'll be gone," he said softly. "Don't try to find me. Luke, promise me." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears burning at the corners of my eyes. That night the house was silent. I stayed awake, listening for his truck, hoping he'd change his mind. But when dawn came, the sound I heard wasn't an engine, it was thunder. A storm rolling back in. I ran outside. The sky was dark, heavy with rain, and by the old dirt road leading out of the ranch. His truck was gone. The storm broke open as I fell to my knees in the mud, the rain mixing with tears I couldn't hold back anymore. He'd kept his promise, and I'd kept mine. It rained for 3 days after Luke left. The kind of rain that turns the fields into rivers and the sky into one endless gray. My uncle didn't mention him once, and neither did I. But every time I passed the barn, I saw him, not in person but in memory. His voice, his hands, the smell of smoke and hay and something like home. By the fourth day, the silence was worse than the rain. I couldn't take it anymore. I drove into town, hoping for something, a trace, a note, anything. But the bar where Luke sometimes stopped was closed. The diner's waitress said she hadn't seen him. Even his small cabin behind the old feed store looked abandoned. That's when I saw the envelope. It was taped to the door. My name written in his rough, hurried handwriting. Ethan. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, stained in one corner like it had been caught in the rain. Ethan, I told you not to look for me, but I knew you would. There's no easy way to explain this. I thought leaving would make things right. For you, for me, for the life I've built from nothing. But the truth is, I've been lying to myself for years. I thought I could bury what I am under work, under silence, under fear. You made me see that I can't. I don't know where I'm going yet. Maybe somewhere nobody knows me. Maybe somewhere I can breathe without looking over my shoulder. But wherever I end up, I'll carry you with me. You were the first person who looked at me and saw something worth saving. Don't wait for me, Ethan. Live your life. Be braver than I ever was. Luke. I stood there for a long time, the rain soaking through my jacket, reading those words again and again until the ink began to blur. He was gone. But something in the letter, that line, be braver than I ever was, felt like a command, not a farewell. I drove home in silence, the windshield streaked with rain. My uncle was on the porch when I arrived, his expression softer than I expected. He didn't say a word, just nodded toward the barn. He came back last night, he said quietly. Left something for you. My chest tightened. I ran inside. On the workbench next to the rebuilt stall was Luke's hat, the same one he wore every day. Folded beneath it was a small photo, faded at the edges. It was of us, taken the day after the fire, both of us covered in soot, laughing like idiots. I hadn't even known he'd kept it. Behind me, my uncle's voice broke the silence. You care about him. I turned, startled. He nodded slowly. I'm not blind, Ethan. I was angry, not because of who you love, but because I saw what it would cost you here. This place eats people who are different. I swallowed hard. He didn't deserve that. No, he said. He didn't. For the first time, there was no judgment in his tone, only regret. That night, I went back to the river where Luke and I had last talked. The sky was clear now, full of stars, the air cool and sharp. I sat on the same rock where he'd sat, the letter folded in my pocket. I thought about all the times he'd walked this land, how he'd watched every sunrise, how he'd hidden so much of himself just to survive. And I realized, maybe love isn't about staying. Maybe it's about freeing someone to finally live. I picked up a small stone and threw it into the water, watching the ripples spread outward. Wherever you are, I whispered. I hope you found peace. The sound of the river answered me, steady, endless, alive. Weeks passed. The world went on. The barn was repaired, the fences mended, life resumed its rhythm. But something in me had shifted. I wasn't afraid anymore, not of being seen, not of loving. Not of losing. And then one morning a letter arrived. No return address, just one sentence inside. The sky here is wide, Ethan. You'd love it. I didn't need a signature to know who it was from. I smiled, tears blurring my vision, and folded the note carefully. He was alive. Somewhere far from judgment, far from fear, maybe under that same wide sky we'd once watched together. And though part of me still ached for him, another part finally understood what he meant. Love wasn't about possession. It was about truth, even if that truth hurt. That night, I told my uncle I was leaving. He didn't argue. He just looked at me and said, "You're your mother's son, always chasing the horizon." I packed lightly, a few clothes, Luke's hat, and his last letter. As I drove away, the morning sun broke over the fields, turning everything golden. The same road he'd taken weeks before stretched out ahead of me, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of where it led. I didn't know if I'd ever find him again, but I knew that wherever he was, our stories were still connected. Two souls shaped by the same fire, the same rain, the same love that refused to disappear. Maybe someday, when the world is kinder, our paths will cross again. Until then, I'll keep driving under that same wide sky, chasing the echoes of a man who taught me that even the strongest hearts can tremble, and that sometimes trembling is the bravest thing you can do.